been there, the 3 a.m. panic, and it's the night before a big exam. You're fueled by your coffee, trying to cram in 3 weeks of lectures into 2 hours, and your memory is simply refusing to work. Is this a sign of failure, or is it a proof that the hustle culture is wrong? We all as students have probably felt this exact type of crushing pressure, the kind that makes you stare at a page and comprehend nothing. The feeling of, I should be doing something more, is practically the college soundtrack. And it's sabotaging your grades and your mental health. So, today, to stop fighting that feeling, here we have a world renowned neuroscientist who explains exactly why your brain is not broken, it just needs a better user manual. Welcome you all to Shaastra course Beyond the Known, where we translate the complex into the practical. I'm your host, Arshada S. And today we are joined by Dr. Sarah McKay, a leading neuroscientist who turns complex brain science into practical strategies for you to implement in your everyday life. Dr. Sarah is an Oxford-educated researcher, the founder of Think Brain and the Neuroscience Academy, also a hugely popular author of books including Brain Health for Dummies, Women's Brain Book, and Baby Brain. Essentially a person who is here to teach us all of us how our brains actually work and how powerful and adaptable they truly are. Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here.
Yes, ma'am. So, moving on to questions. Yeah. So, Dr. Sarah, you transformed from an Oxford researcher to becoming this powerful public voice for neuroscience. Why do you think that young adults need to know these brain insights? And how important are these to college life?
I think if we have an insight into what our brains do, we can understand more about keeping them healthy, and this has immediate knock-on effects in terms of our performance, in terms of our health and well-being, our ability to think, our ability to regulate our emotions, our overall mood. I don't think we all need to be a neuroscientist and understand exactly what is going on inside the brain and how the brain does everything. And I've certainly been working in the neuroscience space for, 30 years now, and I don't understand how the brain works yet. But the basic kind of concept that I like to teach is that all the brain does is it gathers information from different sources and it figures out what that information means so it can tell our body what to do next. And sometimes that happens like moment by moment by moment. And sometimes that kind of might happen over a much longer time scale, even experiences we had when we were young in terms of determining how we might behave tomorrow. By information that the brain gathers, the brain is receiving this constant stream of information and data streaming in from our body, and I call this the bottom-up information. So everything from your heart rate to the food you've eaten, your genes, do you have a viral infection? What are your hormone levels? What's your, how well slept are you? So there's a lot of information about our biology. And our brain is also making meaning of information that's coming from the outside world. And it receives this information through our senses. So what we see and what we hear, mostly because we're humans, but also, we could smell something or taste something. And then we also might have a sense of like gravity and, which way is kind of up in the world. And then we're also humans, we have memories, we have expectations, we have beliefs. And the brain is making meaning of all of this information at once. It doesn't prioritize one signal over another. It makes meaning of all of this information, and then it determines, well, what is important to do next. For example, it may perceive that your body temperature has started to rise slightly, and that's a pretty simple, straightforward signal. And so what to do next is, well, I should sweat and vasodilate to cool down. Perhaps that message might reach your conscious awareness such that you then take your coat off or open a window because it's hot.
True.
A different type of signal might be, I can hear someone calling my name in another room, and I stop and I turn and I pay attention and I go, who was that? And you go, oh, that's my child. They need me to come quickly. I can tell by the sound of and tone of their voice because I have previous experiences of hearing them shout like this. So I know I have to run to the other room. So there's all kinds of things the brain is doing, interpreting information and then going, oh, well, this is what I'll do next. This is what I'll do next.
Yes, ma'am, truly. We all feel all of these signals, and we don't really have to be neuroscientist or a biologist to know what's really happening. Just small insights. Yes.
Yeah, just a
really
conceptual framework. And when we learn things and we have experiences, our brain learns, well, that was useful. I'll do that next time I'm in this situation. Or maybe the brain learned, that I didn't like that sucked, or that was a scary experience, or that was uncomfortable. Next time I'm in that situation, oh, I don't know whether I'll do that again. So, we learn as well. The data is then stored in our brains because our brains are learning so that we can make predictions.
Indeed, our brains are truly evolved to learn from experiences. Exactly. So, moving on to the next question. Many students who are listening to us right now would have sometimes felt overwhelmed with studies and be convinced that they have poor productivity. To these learners, can you explain what neuroplasticity is? How can they harness this natural ability to learn faster and to retain more?
Yeah, and so neuroplasticity is a big word that simply means the brain learns by experience, kind of what I've said. You have an experience, you do something, the brain goes, well, that was useful. I'll do that again next time. Or I didn't enjoy that. I won't do that again. So the brain retains that plasticity throughout our lives in terms of learning, but there are perhaps different ages and life stages when different networks or regions in the brain are more or less plastic. For example, when you're a baby and a small child, your language centers of your brain are very, very
Yes,
plastic, which means it's super easy to learn language. You don't have to sit down and do vocab and learn rules of grammar. You
true,
just
true.
absorb it because your language centers are hyper plastic. And that means they are primed, they'll just learn by experience. Later on in life, if you're my age, 50, it's so hard to learn a new language. You don't, because my language centers aren't as plastic. I could learn a new language, but I would have to apply different types of principles of learning. I would have to pay a lot of attention. I would have to perhaps do quite a lot of repetition, particularly spaced repetition. It would help if I had a guide or a teacher or a mentor, someone who could, who understood how to learn that language, correct me when I make mistakes, motivate me and keep me on track. I can't learn passively like a baby would learn language. I have to be alert. I have to be focused. And it helps to have some kind of positive emotions, like there's some satisfaction. You feel progression in that kind of process. You feel, hey, I can do this. So you have a
Yes,
sense of agency. And then you also you can't binge learn. You need to space learning. You need repetition, but you also
true.
need rest. You also need sleep. And sleep helps consolidate that learning process.
So, as you said, learning a language at an age of 50 is slightly harder than as a baby. So, does that
Very.
mean that neuroplasticity reduces with age or something like that? Does the ability to learn faster reduce with age?
Does, yes, particularly for new tasks that you've never encountered before. And that's because we have different kinds of cognitive capacities. And one of those is working memory. So that's holding ideas in our mind's eye, doing mental maths or remembering a complex plot in a movie. And that declines slightly with age as you go through your lifespan. But different people will have different sort of steepnesses of that. You want it to
Yes.
be as not steep. And that means it's harder to learn something new that you've never encountered before. So perhaps think about, you bought your grandmother a new TV and she's there going, I don't know how to use the remote control. Like, it's a really hard process to navigate and learn something new. But if you're 18, you could pick the remote control up and just figure it out really quickly and easily because you're better at learning and approaching new things. But sometimes we have different capacities, like we're better at learning different things at different ages. You might be, as
Yes.
you get older, kind of peak in not learning something new, but perhaps being able to see and approach an idea from different angles. You might not hold such a dogmatic belief. You might have more capacity to be kind of flexible and approach a problem from different angles, because you can't rely on the speed perhaps. So you have to rely on like the thoughtful strategy. So there are different skills which kind of ebb and flow across the lifespan.
That's truly insightful, Mom. So, moving on to the next question. So, I remember from one of your TED Talk, Indulge in Neurobiology, you shared a specific brain hack to improve memory, spark creativity, and to regulate emotions. This kind of goes against the current hustle culture that students dwell in. Can you share this hack for our students right now here?
Yeah. So the hack is an afternoon nap. And this isn't going to bed and lying there for 3 hours asleep or lying in bed and looking at your phone. This is having a strategic nap if you experience, and you have to have that urge, it almost works best if you're fighting that urge to want to have a mid-afternoon nap or a siesta. There are different cultures in different parts of the world where having a siesta or an afternoon nap is really acceptable, and is, some parts of Europe, you go to Spain, whole cities shut down kind of in the afternoon. So there's different parts of the world where it's seen as lazy, and other parts of the world where it's seen as essential. For me, I started napping in my early years of university when I would get to that kind of about 2:30 in the afternoon, and I would just be hit by this overwhelming just sleepiness. I found I spent 2 or 3 hours trying not to fall asleep. And what I learned was I could feel terrible for 2 or 3 hours, or I could have a 20-minute nap. And I call
True.
this a strategic nap or a power nap, because you're having it for a very limited amount of time for the specific reason of reducing your sleep drive. It is very important to keep it short, because if you have it long, if you sleep for an hour or an hour and a half, you fall into deep wave sleep. And if you fall into deep sleep, it's harder to wake up. When you wake up, you feel horrible.
Yeah.
You feel all tired and confused. If you have a short sleep, you don't fall into deep sleep, so you don't wake. It's easy to wake up from. You can almost bounce up and jump to your desk and start working. And
True.
two, if you have a short nap, it doesn't disrupt your sleep later that night. So what it does is it just reduces that sleep drive, and it can, as you said, it can help with, it can improve memory of the things that you learned prior, and it can help you just be more emotionally regulated. It can help you choose what to focus on instead of feeling sleepy and distractible. You can just kind of hack that, just have the short sleep, come back, and then you're ready to go. It's like a second day.
Investing that 20 minutes on a nap is better than regretting on the wasted 3 hours instead of taking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously, you might be a surgeon working, you might be a bus driver, you might be a teacher. There's lots of jobs, things that mean you can't necessarily have this all of the time when you want, depending on who you are and what your life is like. And, if you can implement it, I think some people find it really useful.
Yes, ma'am. Truly. I think as students, we can always find at least some time in the schedule for a small nap so that it can improve productivity, surely. So, for the next question, many students take pride in multitasking, including me, actually.
Oh, gosh.
Studying with music, texting, and jumping between tabs. But you've talked lots about the myth of multitasking. So, from a neuroscience perspective, what is actually happening in our brains when we try to juggle between tasks? And why is that approach the absolute worst for creating long term memory?
Yeah. So when we are multitasking, we are using our attention. The way I think about attention, and the way I think about multitasking is to think about attention, because essentially multitasking is kind of flipping your attention between different tasks, as you said. I imagine like you're in a dark room and you've got a torch with it, and it's completely dark except for your torch. Attention is exactly like the beam of light coming out of that torch. It could be broad and diffuse or narrow, but you can only focus it in one direction at a time, right? You can't look at one wall and then the wall behind you at the same time. You can only look at one and look at the other and look at one and look at the other. And when we know that when you do that, when you split your attention to flip between tasks, your performance in both of those tasks just drops. So say you were doing a maths task on a piece of paper, and then on the other piece of paper, you were doing some kind of perhaps a language translation task. And you worked on the maths, and then you went over to the language, and then you went on the maths, and then you were marked on those, your score on both of those would be far worse than if you just focused on one versus the other. So your performance drops on those, and at the same time, your stress levels rise. And once a little bit of kind of stress is a good thing. We don't want to be completely relaxed and asleep, but we don't want to be so hyped up that we can't perform. So, overall, it's not good for your health, because it increases your stress levels and it reduces your performance as well. So instead of, thinking multitasking is great, really it's about, sort of focusing on one task at a time and completing that, and then the next task at a time, because if you want to do well, you won't do well by splitting your attention and flip-flopping.
So what's an ideal attention span that you would suggest? Because as students, we juggle between subjects. We have to take up many subjects. So what is the ideal attention span that you would suggest would be helpful?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether there's a particular recipe or protocol. Have you heard of the Pomodoro technique that's often recommended? Yeah, where you do like a set, and you would do within one kind of study session, you could just do one subject, not do
True.
5 subjects. So do one study session and then have a break, and then do another study session and look at a different project. That's not multitasking. Multitasking is trying to do 5 subjects in like the 40-minute or whatever. So I would think about it like that. And that's very much about having a strategy and having a plan that you've thoughtfully worked out in advance. There's flexibility in case stuff happens. But, you've got a plan and then you execute that plan. One of the worst things that probably many students do is that they're studying with this next to them, with their phone.
Mobile phone.
So you've got your mobile phone, and there's data out there, there's research out there that has looked that even if you have a phone next to you and it's face down, people put it face down, you can't see it, that even if it's turned off, but it is in your room, it's always it's kind of micro grabbing your attention. It's if you've got your torchlight, you look at my phone. Oh, no, I don't need to look at my phone. I'll focus on this. Oh, no, I don't need to look at my phone. Because phones have become so salient, so important to our brain. It's almost like a baby. It's almost like a mum carrying a newborn baby around. We can't put it down. Like, we have to always be focusing and paying attention to it. And so our brain is always flipping to the phone and then coming back. And studies that have, scoring people on working memory, if they've got a phone in the room with them, their marks will go down on that. So you've got to put it in another room so it's out of arm's reach. And what I've started doing and I use it, I've got it on airplane mode when I'm having this chat with you, but I always like to use it because I like to use it as a prop.
Okay.
But typically what I've started doing is I plug it in to the wall to charge in my kitchen, and I treat it like an old-fashioned wall phone. If someone really needs me, they'll call or they'll text, and then I'll walk over to the phone and I'll answer it. So I'm trying, when I'm doing other things, during the evening with my family, I'm not doing it with the phone, directing my attention.
Indeed, that baby analogy for phone was truly insightful. Thanks a lot, Mom. So, college is a pressure cooker, actually, leading to high levels of stress and anxiety. And during these times, we all know the stress hormone cortisol is released. What is one immediate solution that you would suggest to overcome the stress?
I suppose we can think about it as this immediate, in your face, sudden stressor that's just jumped up like there's a spider running up the wall? Or is it the long-term kind of grind of exams and daily, kind of grind of assignments? So there's different approaches that we would take to deal with those sorts of situations. In terms of perhaps that long, low bubbling grind, I think that kind of stress needs to be overcome using lots of the basic principles of overall health and well-being. So focusing on your sleep, because if you sleep well at night, it is easier to build all of the other pieces of health and well-being on top. Exercise is so important in there, not just because it's good for brain health and it's good for mental health. When you are physically fit, you have good cardiovascular fitness. That means that your overall physiology is resistant to the cortisol, resistant to the rise. Your brain doesn't mistake a little increase in heart rate as like a sign of anxiety. It's, your heart rate is your cardiovascular fitness is such that you are able to kind of cope with a little bit more kind of going on around you. So I think sleep and I think exercise are fundamentally important. And there's loads of different ways people can exercise. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to swim. You don't have to do CrossFit. You don't have to ride a bike, but just doing some kind of exercise where you're getting your heart rate up and you're sustaining that and doing that multiple times a week. Maybe you could lift weights. That's just such a great way to help manage your stress responses, because you're getting your sympathetic nervous system kind of up and going, and you're releasing all of these stress hormones in a good way. And then you're coming back down as you recover from that exercise. So it's like kind of almost like a good positive physiological stress that you're teaching yourself to recover from. So they would be perhaps the two things I would do. And perhaps one of the other best ways we know, like for all people everywhere of all ages and life stages, is other people. Having other people who love and care for us that we can lean on. If we're unhappy, we need a conversation. I know now almost my default is if there's something super stressful and I can't call my husband or talk to him or he's not around, I'll always call my mum. I still have my mum, and just having a big long call with her, and she'll listen to me no matter what, because she's not my mum. She's my mum. Not everyone has that, but just that just makes me feel better. So leaning on other people and then having other people around for some joy and some fun and conversation and celebration. We don't have enough positive fun and upsides either in our lives. Maybe you have them, but lots of people I know don't.
Truly, ma'am, true. Actually, yes, sleep and social connections and exercising outdoors are truly helpful not only for reducing stress but also for brain performance. Truly, yes. I hope our listeners will include all of these in their daily habits. But
I
still,
hope so.
I would like to ask, like, how can they induce exercise into their schedule? Like, how much time would you suggest for them to invest in exercises, social connecting?
I think, if we kind of look over the course of the week, and I'm not sure if your country has, kind of activity guidelines, we don't need to be doing things every day, but we could like try and say you commute to university or to school. Can you get out of the bus 5 stops earlier and walk the last
Yes,
kilometer? Something simple like that. Using the stairs instead of the lifts, joining the gym. Are there classes that you can go to with your friends at the gym? Are there sports teams that you can join? Even just something simple as perhaps having a standing desk.
yes,
There's just so many different ways we can think about that and be creative. Perhaps you're listening to a podcast or you're listening to an online lecture. Can you walk? Can you go to the gym on the treadmill and
exactly.
listen to that? Just ways in which you can kind of incorporate it into your life rather than if you have a very busy day trying to fit something else in. Can you kind of do it at the same time as? And I think incorporating, even if you're doing 20 minutes a day more than what you're doing now, that is probably going to be more beneficial than sitting at a desk with a book studying for 20 minutes.
Indeed, indeed. That will actually help our performance as well and reduce the time of studying truly.
Yeah.
So, moving on from all these questions, let's have a quick myth busting round where I shall present common student beliefs and you can quickly confirm if it's a fact or debunk if it's a myth.
Okay.
So, the first thing is students usually listen to these binaural beats or the specific brain music while studying. And is it scientifically proven that it will increase your focus and memory retention?
I think for some people, it helps to have some kind of background noise. For other people, it's a very big distraction. So I would say depends.
So the next clue. Deep sleep not only helps consolidate your memories but also strengthens your long-term retention of fat.
I think that those are the same thing. So, yes, you need deep sleep to learn and to consolidate what you've learned during the day. And so, like, memory of facts is the same thing. So, yes.
So the next thing. Brain fog during exam week is an inevitable part of being stressed. Is it a myth or a fact?
Gosh, no. I would hope that you're very clear during exam week. And brain fog, which is a very vague term that people perhaps, I think that's probably a sign of feeling overly stressed, hypervigilant, lack of sleep. It's not inevitable. And in fact, you should be trying to do all of the things that we've talked about to try and dial that down and prevent that.
I hope our students would follow that for the brain fog thing. And so here we come to the conclusion. A huge thank you to Dr. Sara for sharing such enlightening insights and helping us understand that our brain is an ally, not an enemy for us. The core takeaway is clear. Your brain is adaptable, and these small science backed habits like rest, movement, social connectivity, naps are indeed the real hacks to mastering memory and mental health. To our audience, if you're curious to know more adulting hacks, stay tuned, stay curious, and keep exploring the wisdom that lies beyond the known. I'm your host Arshada, signing off.